You're listening to the Endless Party Radio Show with the Doc on Colossal Radio.
Does this sound familiar? I think it just might. You might have heard this once or twice before, I believe. Here it is. Herman, Lily, right? Hang on. Grandpa. Wait, we're not done yet. Hang on. I wonder what was going on with Marilyn. What was going on with Marilyn, man? There he is. There's Eddie. There's Eddie. Butch Patrick as Eddie Munster. Ladies and gentlemen, let's bring him on the show. Butch, how was that for a lead-in? That was pretty cool, right?
You know, I think that's the Fall Out Boy version. Just kidding.
Welcome to the show, Butch Patrick as Eddie Munster, a pop culture icon, and I can't believe that I have you on the show after watching this show, and now I'm talking to Eddie Munster. This is like wigging me out, man.
Well, you know, you mentioned pop culture, and you know, I worked from 1960 to about 1972, and what a great window to be in Hollywood for music, for movies, for television. And I was lucky enough to be on a lot of great pop culture-ish type shows. You know, I did My Favorite Martian. I did a couple of Mr. Eds. I did I Dream of Jeannie.
Yeah.
I worked with the Monkees. I worked with Chuck Jones. It was wonderful. I mean, I couldn't have asked for a better window to be part of the industry.
Yeah, no, for real. And you know, speaking of that, and I, as I said to Butch before we went on the air, nothing scripted. I do this with just about every one of my guests, and it's just I like it that way because I think it's more authentic and real. And with you bringing that up, wasn't it just the shows were fun? I mean, you know, it wasn't all this blood and guts and all the. I mean, you know, they were iconic, and here they are, even standing the test of time. Butch.
Yeah. Well, a friend of mine who now is a big producer in Hollywood, but was probably one of the number one Munsters fans. He made a point a few years ago that I thought was very interesting. That basically the 50s, a lot of people consider that to be the golden age of television, and really it was sort of like the learning years of television. And television really came into its own in the 60s, because in the 50s it was just visual radio.
Mm-hmm.
And in the 60s it came into a sitcom format where they really learned the writers, the comedic writers, the great talent we had, and everybody had moved to Hollywood at that point, and they started creating comedy shows that became legendary. And it was all about entertainment value. It didn't want to reflect real everyday life of blood and guts and doctors and this and that. They wanted to have talking horses, and they wanted to have plenty of storylines that featured genies and witches and Munsters and Addams families and talking cars and all of the above. Was a great melting pot for not only, you know, give an example, the Munsters. We had wonderful guest stars earlier in their career. You know, before the Carol Burnett show, we had Harvey Korman twice. We had Don Rickles, we had Frank Gorshin before he was the Riddler, and so on and so on and so on.
Wow.
And it just was a wonderful place to be, and it reflects into the longevity and the staying power of some of those old shows. They were quality shows, starting with quality talent and quality writing.
Yeah, for real. And I remember watching it with my dad. I mean, all those shows that you mentioned, and my dad would always say, God rest his soul, would always say, give me a comedy show up and beyond this blood and guts TV, and I'll take that any day of the week. And how true he was, you know, so much fun. So let's talk a little bit about, though, Eddie Munster and the Munsters, and we'll touch base on a few other of the shows. But there you are. What was with that big bat when you right there in the beginning with the theme song? What was with the big bat?
Well, the second season, we opened up with Herman walking through the front door. Everybody had a little bit of prop. Grandpa came out with his spade and, you know, bounces off the door and then goes through it again. You know, an old vaudeville shtick. Lily reaches out, you know, sees the rain and looks at it as a wonderful day. And they gave Eddie, you know, this giant baseball bat because everything was opposite, you know. So they gave me a big balsa wood bat to hit the imaginary home run. And it was just a goofy gimmick that they always use. But that was the whole show. Was everything was, you know, a typical situation that another family would do would be, you know, not funny, but with the everything was up was down, down was up, and everything became funny.
It was. And then you had Marilyn. She was the one. No makeup, just Marilyn. That was her, the blonde.
Well, that was the running gag. Was basically the show worked on judging a book by its cover, and don't be judgmental, because she couldn't see the problem with us. Everybody else that she would bring to the front door to introduce to the family would run away.
Yeah.
To us, to us, she was a loving family member that we thought was unfortunate, that didn't get the gift of beauty. We thought we were the norm, and it made for very funny writing. And then you had Fred and Al playing Herman and Grandpa as a comedy team, doing great stuff together.
Yeah, it was. It was. I don't know. It was such pop culture that we can and iconic shows that we a lot of us right now on board with this show with Butch Patrick as Eddie Munster and many other characters, as he said, throughout the 60s and 70s in Hollywood. But is there any one moment that stands out when we focus on the Munsters? Any one moment that might stick out, Butch, that was like funny or crazy or behind the scenes going, or like, no freaking way am I doing that?
Well, probably the one that comes to mind. Number one, my favorite episodes are always included the car, the Munster coach. Being a kid, building models, and having George Barris' shop just down the street. When they introduced the Munster coach into the mix, it was like the coolest car in Hollywood and on television. So I would always get the ride in the back, and that was a very cool place to be. We were outside, which meant that we were seeing the sunshine, and we weren't inside the soundstage, which was dark and dingy. So that in itself was a treat. Being in the car was a double treat. But the thing that I remember the most was Fred Gwynn driving off the lot unauthorized with the whole family in tow, just to do a prank on everybody, because they told him to drive away from the front of the house, turn around and come back immediately in case they needed to do it again, as it was getting late in the day and they didn't want to lose their son. And of course, you tell Fred not to do something, it's like, okay, that's just asking for trouble. So what did he do? He drove off the front lot of the unit. We waved at the guard gate. We went through the green light on Lancashire Boulevard and went up the street towards the Hollywood Bowl, turned around and came back. And it was one of those things where you don't know how much gas is in the car. It's not the most dependable vehicle in the world. God rest his soul, George Barris. It was a show car, not a licensed and issued street legal vehicle. But that's one of the things that I remember the most.
That's funny. That is too funny. And then, of course, Herman Munster went on to Car 54 fame.
He did that before.
Before. It was before. Okay.
Yeah. Car 54 was that's why it was so cool to have them coming out. One of the reasons the show was so successful was you had Fred and Al from Car 54, which was a New York-based show, but they came to L.A. They slipped in Yvonne DiCarlo at the last minute, and me and Yvonne were last-minute replacements for Joan Marshall and Happy Durman. And Yvonne was a major movie star who decided to do television, which wasn't really done in those days. I mean, movie stars did movies, and TV was considered second-class work. So for her to become Lily Munster was quite a coup.
Wow. It's the topics we can bring up for you, as you said, working with certainly some A-listers and back in the day, and one that comes to mind, or two, working with Judy Garland and Burt Lancaster.
Yeah, that was a John Cassavetes movie. He directed that, and he was also, a very avant-garde, kind of like an American Fellini type director. He was an actor who turned into directing, and he was, very edgy and creative. And he had this movie with Judy Garland, and I was only I only worked like 3 days, but it was still enough time to get a feel for greatness. You don't have to be around people very long to know there's something special about them. And being, Wizard of Oz being my favorite movie of all time, and actually seeing Judy Garland, and then spending time interacting at the lunch table with Burt Lancaster, it was awesome. And I was lucky enough to, as a kid, I met Walt Disney before I started doing Disney movies, and then I had a chance to meet Rod Serling out at Paramount when I was doing Lidsville. Even briefly as it was, you could immediately sense this guy's presence, and he was coming up with these scripts for the Twilight Zone out of another dimension, because you could feel that he had a little bit of something else going on to him, about him, that it wasn't normal. It was great. I mean, not in a bad way.
Right.
It was just you sense that he had something going on about these stories that he could convey into script form for the Twilight Zone, because he wrote most of them and they were all good.
Yeah, I remember watching that too. I mean, crazy. Butch Patrick, Eddie Munster, as we know, has the biggest. Was that the biggest claim to fame for you? I mean, with you, for you right now. I mean, even though you did, roles with I Dream of Jeannie and Death Valley Days, Gunsmoke, The Monkees, but that was the mark for you, Butch?
Yeah, everybody pretty much. I mean, I'm happy that it is. It's okay with me. The
Sure.
Monsters is a timeless, well done, family values,
Yep.
good, strong character stuff. I mean, it's one of those deals where you don't have any problem buying the DVD set and letting your kids binge watch it, because it's fun, it's entertaining,
Yep.
and it's a quality show. And one of the reasons I think that its staying power is so strong is now that when I watch it occasionally, I look at different things. I look at the set design. I look at the sound,
Yep.
listen to the sound,
Agreed.
see the editing, see the angles, the camera angles that they were using. And what they did is Universal was the monster studio. Every studio back in the day had sort of a theme. 20th Century did the disaster movies, MGM did musicals, and so on and so on. But Universal was the monster movie with all of the great monster movies, Boris Karloff, Lon Chaney, everybody that was in the monster genre. It was a Universal monster movie. They took that and they matched it with Leave It to Beaver producers and writers for a family-type series, and that mix made it perfect because it looked like a monster movie shot on film, black and white, editing, shadowing, cobwebs, and yet the storylines were very Leave It to Beaverish. So it worked out really well.
I'll tell you, and that is a great thing for nowadays where we are in this country, and I'm a father of two boys, and you see things anymore with the values and the respect, which there is. It's almost non-existent. It's absolutely crazy, and yet these shows, the way they were done is so important nowadays. When you look at it, I mean, there was no bullying, on the show. There were values. Even that lesson that Herman said with words of advice from Herman Munster when you were sitting there at the table. I mean, when you look back at that, and somebody sent me a clip on that yesterday. Do you remember this episode? Which I do. When your dad was giving the advice on doing the right thing and just do you and just be kind. I mean, that's a good thing, Butch. That's a good thing.
Right. The strength of your character. It doesn't matter what you look like. Yeah. I mean, I see that all the time reposted on Facebook, and people ask me a lot. They go, why can't they make shows like that anymore?
Yep.
It's a big common question, and I tell them, like, well, number one, TV has always been when I did my movie Munster Memories, it's basically people sharing their memories of what the show is about. And they always have these fond memories of the past, whether it's their grandparents they watch it or whether they ran home from school and they had their snacks watching it. Whatever it is, it's a feel-good memory bank. Now, people today, they can't make shows like that because TV is a reflection of everyday life. And the world today is a pretty sad place. So when you look at the nostalgia channels, this is why there's so many of them, and that's why they flourish so well, is people want to remember things of a more friendly, softer, warm, fuzzy feeling. You don't have to lock your door, come home when the streetlights come on, eat dinner together at 5:30 or 6. All that stuff that is no longer available in everyday life. That's what they want to revert to. And that's why these old shows do so well.
Absolutely. And to be part of them, in the capacity that you were is just so iconic, so amazing. What, I see I Dream of Jeannie too, and I do know that you did some cameo appearances there. I loved her. How cool would that have been, man? I would have loved, listen, first of all, he wasn't even smart because, man, I would have loved, he always would get wigged out when she would want him to take him in the bottle. I would love that chance for Barbara Eden to take me in that bottle. That's all I can tell you.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. And I mean, look at it. Just look back at her genie outfit was considered to be too risque for television. And because when her navel could show, I mean, it's amazing where society has gone in 50 years. It really is. It's almost hard to imagine. But yeah, I mean, it was one of those deals. And I actually thought, I'm going to tell you something. When I did Mr. Ed, Connie Hines, who played Alan Young's wife,
right? She
was gorgeous. Up to go. One of the episodes that I did, they were going to a Halloween party, and I got to tell you, she was dressed up as a genie, and she was just as cute as Barbara Eden.
Oh, no kidding! Yeah, that's awesome.
And yet he still spent a lot of time with that horse.
Now listen, you are still making appearances all over the country. Where does Butch Patrick, and ladies and gentlemen, Butch Patrick, Eddie Munster on board with the show? Where does Butch Patrick call home?
Well, I grew up in Los Angeles. I had a house that I bought a few years ago in north central Missouri that my grandmother used to own, a big old 1875 Queen Anne. I bought it to maintain it, to restore it so it wouldn't hit the wrecking ball. And now I'm on the road most of the time, but when I am not on the road, it is Orlando.
Oh, very nice, very cool. And I know we have a tight schedule. You have a bunch of things that are coming up as well. But what's next? What's next on the list for Butch Patrick?
Well, as you know, I have a Munster coach and Dragula tribute vehicle that when I purchased them 4 or 5 years ago, I started doing automotive events almost exclusively. And we go around the country, but what I've been doing lately is stopping along the way to visit people with interesting little shops and scenarios and businesses between the big cities. And it's been really successful. We've met a lot of great people. What I'm doing is I'm working with a gentleman named Jeff Grimshaw, who I met in 1980s when he was doing Super Scary Saturday with Al Lewis down for TBS. He asked me if I'd like to partner up to do a show, and he has this show that he was going to do 20 years ago with Dan Aykroyd that is called Way Out There. And what it is, it's a talk show with a format of people who have some interesting spins on reality that would like to share their thoughts, whether it be flat earthers or people that believe they've seen Bigfoot or anything along the lines would be considered way out there. And it could be friends, it could be yourself, it could be something out of the ordinary. We're going to give them a platform and a place to share their thoughts, and it's going to be basically driven by video, and it's going to be a live stream situation. It'll be internet subscriber based, which is basically how things are done these days, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, that's nice.
You keep your eyes open for that. Anything, the information, if people would like to follow me, it's munsters.com. We have a huge Facebook presence. We have almost 20,000 people in the fan group, and it's spam-free, friendly. It's my wife runs it, and she makes sure that nothing negative gets in there, and we go around the country with a company called Munster's Events, and we help people and businesses promote and market themselves to make sure when they bring us in for a show that the Munster fans are aware. They come out in big numbers, and we help their businesses flourish.
Wow, interesting, man. I listen. You always have an open door here, man. If you ever get into the Poconos, I know with the car shows and everything, you've been around this area.
Absolutely. Poconos is great. In fact, one of the biggest Munster fans is the other side of the state. He's over in Pittsburgh. But we come and go through the area quite often. And, it's funny, when you were introducing me, I was listening to the Todd Rundgren thing. It's like, it reminds me of, why isn't he in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? Yeah. And then I was reading where Sid and Marty Krofft are getting their star on the Walk of Fame as well. And the next year we may be shooting for Burt Wart's getting one. And I asked a friend who runs that, I said, is it too late for the Munsters to get a star? And he goes, well, they don't really do group stars, but although they did the Monkees for music because it was a rock group. Mm-hmm. And I said, because I would love to have a star in the Hollywood Walk of Fame before I croak.
Yeah.
And he says, you would fit right into that, because right now they're really looking for old-time iconic characters and people like that. And he goes, and Eddie Munster, it's one of the most iconic characters we got going in Hollywood.
Oh man, I'll say, man, for real. I think they owe it to you. That's for sure. Sid and Marty Krofft there. Sid and Marty Krofft. There's another one. HR Puffin stuff.
Well, I did Lidsville for him. I did their first
Did you?
series,
Yeah.
With Charles Nelson Riley and Billy Hayes, and it was the summer of '71, and it was quite an experience, believe me.
How about it? Hey, do you ever, when we're going into the '60s and '70s show, how about Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In?
Oh, Smothers Brothers and Rowan and Martin. That was one of the things I tell people. I was born in '53. I was old, young enough, and I had enough. When I was 7 years old, I started working. Elvis, the Beatles were coming through the '60s, and then muscle cars, and then my dad was a professional baseball player. My stepfather was, so for 4 or 5 years I got to go to the ballpark.
Wow.
Then when the muscle car thing I went to the drag strips with the gentleman that invented the funny car. I've had a wonderful. I wouldn't trade my childhood for anything. Kind of got into a little mischief in the '60s, '70s, like everybody else, but survived. And now I'm on the other end. I'm coming out 9 years sober, so everything was good.
That's great, man. Do we have any kids? Do we have any children?
No, I just got married for the first time 3 years ago at 63. In another 4 days, I'll have my 3-year anniversary.
Okay, that's all right. So good news. Do you still have that? Do you still have that werewolf doll? Did they give you the werewolf doll from the set?
The Wolf doll was given to me, but not at the time of the Munsters. I was out doing an Ironside about 5 years later, and the prop man gave it to me. I kind of let him deteriorate. I wound up selling him to a gentleman. He made a doll off the original doll. I have him, so I have Son of Wolf. And then the original is in a museum in Indiana.
Wow, how about that? This, like I said, and Butch said too when we went on, how long are we going? I mean, he's got other things going on, and for the 20 some minutes that we've been able to hang out with Butch Patrick, Eddie Munster, it has been phenomenal. We could go on and on and on, and your vibe and energy is so good, and you can feel it, and it's been just a great pleasure to even just to be able to chat a little bit and bring you to this colossal posse of listeners here on Colossal Radio.
Thank you very much. It's you're a good host, and it's easy to get excited when you're leading the ship.
I don't know. People have said that. I don't know. It's just I just like when you like what you do and do what you love. It's a good thing, and that's. I don't know, 35 years. Can't believe it's lasted this long, but I'm very grateful. And again, with you, being able to spend some time with us here on the show was absolutely phenomenal. So continued success, certainly throughout. If Dave the bookie, my publicist, can get in touch with you or through your people or PR people, you're ever close to the area and you want to swing through, I mean, you're always welcome. We'll always make some time for you. That's for sure.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much. And remember, everybody, Munsters.com will lead you down the path of anything we do. You can check my schedule and hopefully come out and meet us in person.
Yeah, there you go, Munsters.com, and we'll be sure to tag that. Also do want to let you know that with this interview, I like to throw them up on the Colossal Radio YouTube channel. So we'll throw this interview up on the Colossal Radio YouTube channel as well. Butch or Eddie Munster, Butch Patrick, ladies and gentlemen, tight, stick around. We'll be back.
Lehighton, Palmerton, Gem Thorpe, and nationwide, it's Colossal Radio. Find us online at colossalradio.rocks.